here today with Professor Giovanni Dosi from the Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies in Pisa, Italy. He's just written a new paper on the relationship between Keynesian economics and Schumpeterian innovation that he delivered at a conference here in New York yesterday. Thanks for joining us.
Well, it was a great pleasure. It is a great pleasure to be here, and it is very exciting to be part of this INET enterprise. But the paper, I think, fits quite well into the general INET philosophy and objective, in the sense that it tries to account for an economy that is fueled by endogenous innovation. This is the Schumpeterian engine of innovation. At the same time, it is shown that each economy, including innovating economy, have always a coordination problem among multiple agents. This coordination problem demands often Keynesian policies of demand management. The innovation, putting it another way, the innovative engine is not sufficient to keep the system on a high growth path near full employment. But you need complementary demand management measures.
One of the grants that were just authorized in the first round are a couple of women, one from University of Michigan and one from Yale, who are studying Cleveland in the period of the Great Depression. Because there, in Cleveland, there was a great deal of innovation on the supply side, but there was deficient demand. So many of the companies went bankrupt, and we didn't really see the transformation towards the manufacturing sector and away from agriculture in those days in the United States until after World War II. So it sounds quite similar to the kind of logic that you're exploring in this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, I mean, this theme goes well beyond my paper or this empirical study. I think I consider the sound micro foundation of macro possibly the most important challenge for INET and for new economic thinking. I mean, in my view, I'm pretty radical on that. I think that in macroeconomics, everything that could go wrong went wrong in the last 30 years. You have, paradoxically, you represent the economy like being governed by an intertemporal maximizing central planner. And then you show with a lot of waving, a lot of hand waving, that there might be a decentralized equilibrium supporting it. Totally perverse. The challenge is, on the contrary, to have an explicit account of decentralized economies with many agents that interact not necessarily in equilibrium, not necessarily very rational.
And their interactions can be an amplifying feedback loop that takes you further from equilibrium.
Exactly.
Or
it can be
it can be either way.
Order can be an emergent property out of this decentralized interaction in which people make mistakes, adjust imperfectly.
So at some level, the presumed intertemporal centralized system in most models of modern macroeconomics is essentially solving the problem that is what we should be studying.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, of course, if you have got one representative agent, you cannot have the possibility of crisis unless you introduce schizophrenia. That the representative agent goes to himself and says, I want credit. And he tells himself, no, you cannot have it. I want to work.
From one pocket to the other on the same pair of pants.
Yeah.
Well, it seems that by maintained hypothesis, they've solved the problem. When I say the central coordination, they just assume it's solved as opposed to study how the interactions take place.
And if and when, under what condition. I think this is the general challenge. I mean,
so if you are giving direction to INET and young scholars, it's this interaction process, this coordination problems in systems that really is at the essence of...
Exactly. In systems that are also characterized by endogenous innovation. So you have got the endogenous innovation part that is a fundamental engine of capitalism, of capitalist evolution. At the same time, you've got the coordination problem.
How do you see things like the human capital accumulation as playing a role in this? Because people always are appealing to more education or more supply-side human capital policies to augment the technological innovation.
I think this plays an enormous role on the supply side. I mean, to keep the innovation engine running and also the diffusion engine, because I mean, after all, a good deal of progress is made not by the arrival of the innovation itself, but the diffusion throughout the economy.
Developments and adaptations, whether a space program or internet or spin-offs from the defense industry in, in the American example. But, but that diffusion probably relates to the quality of the human capital.
That is fundamental, yes.
And somebody said to me recently that one of the problems with studying human capital in a representative agent is it looks like an intertemporal investment decision.
Yeah.
But in fact, when you and I are working together, if you are better educated, I'm more productive. That there are positive externalities within a community where everyone achieving a higher level of education augments everyone's productivity.
Absolutely.
So there's a public goods problem.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it is dramatic, on the contrary, the neglect of education, especially primary and secondary education, in all Western countries. I mean, from the US, the continental Europe, England. And this, I think, is going to have direct economic effect, but also social effect on the overall social fabric. I mean, it erodes the social cohesion. As the German social democrat used to say, I mean, it divides a society, at least in Europe, in a two-thirds society. The two-thirds, they've got economic and political and digital citizenship, and those that do not.
Right. And that's like Kate Pickett talked about at the first INET conference, the consequences, the psychic consequences and the physical consequences of that inequality end up being very, very powerful, painful, and that hasn't been a big focus of economic analysis to this point. We tend to come up with models that explain why the inequality exists, but not what the consequences and the costs are.
And even the why, I'm not sure that we have very satisfactory models, because I mean, I don't buy entirely the skill bias technical change, for example. I think that there are a lot of political degrees of freedom, and whether, I mean, technical change is the same more or less in the States and in Sweden. Still, Sweden kept committed to a high human capital society, diffused skills, and under the same technical change condition has been able to maintain an income distribution that is not too bad.
Yeah, someone I was talking to yesterday afternoon said that in the United States, we, through foreign direct investment, outsourced a lot of unskilled labor, first to Mexico and then to Asia. But then we knocked the rungs out of the ladder, which allowed the readjustment of the American population to the higher skill categories, the atrophy of our education system came at a very unfortunate time in relation.
And this could be, I mean, education could be also an important part of a reflationary Keynesian package. And after all, one, instead of digging holes and filling them up, as Keynes was suggesting, one could have an education-friendly, innovation-friendly, and environment-friendly public investment.
Yes, yes, and that's, a lot of people are scratching their head as to why that wasn't the thrust of our policies as Obama came into office. That
Because the first priority was to save the bankers, right?
Saving the banks, I think.
No, saving the bankers. I mean,
the bankers. Yeah, that's right. As Joe Stiglitz says, you can save the financial system, and you can save the banking functions without saving the bankers, their creditors, or their stockholders.
Exactly.
And that's so we get drawn into the world of political economy.
Yeah.
As to why certain resource allocation decisions by the government are made. One of the things about your Schumpeterian approach that's attracting many people is they see an analog to what is called Knightian uncertainty, that in financial markets people say, well, you can't see the future, things are not structurally stable, markets are not inherently stable in the statistical sense. So you're out there interacting with, in the fog without a chart. With regard to technical innovation, we're in a place where the price system in the goods and the real market is also subject to that kind of structural uncertainty by its very nature. The dynamism of technical change is reorienting
absolutely.
the economy. So it seems now that there's a convergence between those people who would study like Soros reflexivity or Hyman Minsky on the financial front, the people who are looking at the uncertainty and the dynamism in technical change. And are you seeing research converging between those who study finance and those who study technical?
Well, few. I mean, my group does that, but very few do that. But this is a fundamental point, recognizing that for different reasons. But you have got a fundamental Knightian uncertainty in both markets.
Yes.
Then this is, the next question is, but then what drives, for example, investment in innovation, if people cannot have rational technological expectation? Well, above a certain level of appropriability of innovation, of the return from innovation, I think that are the inherent opportunity associated with each technology that essentially determine how much people search in that technology, quite independently from the fine-tuning of the return associated with that. A good case to the point is the quasi-natural experiment associated with the tightening of the legislation and the practice of IPR in this country, say in the last 20, 30 years. As it produced, well, this of course has increased the rent of the innovators. As it increased the rate of innovation now, it has increased the rate of patenting, but are bad patents. There are, when my friend Sid Winter looked at it, there were, if I remember well, 30 or 40 patents on how to exercise your cat. Probably now there are 100. And these are the irrelevant ones, but the net result has been that it has been a sort of arm race in terms of litigation. And the latest estimates are that the litigation cost of the US industry is 1/3 of R&D.
Oh man, that's an amazing, that's an empiric, I would say stylized fact of the first order.
Yeah.
That's stunning.
That is, American patent lawyer get more than the total R&D budget of Germany.
Wow. And I'm hearing people fighting now, at one level, the traditional notion of the patent to secure property rights, to create the inspiration for the investment. But I'm hearing now that the patent wars are getting to be so intricate,
yeah,
and that obviously one vintage of innovation is the beginning of a chain. But the follow-on in the chain is impossible to do,
exactly,
because of all the entanglements and the legal problems. So
the
that we're stifling innovation by making patents too strong or too
strong and too broad. Is the so-called tragedy of the anti-commons.
Right. I think this is a very fertile direction for people to look at, especially as more and more occupies the realm of intellectual property rights in terms of what is considered value in our society.
And at the same time, I mean, empirically, if you go to firms and you ask what is the most effective way of appropriating your innovation, only in pharmaceutical they say patent at the top. In most other industry there is secret, lead times, complexity, sheer complexities of the product. But IPR are not such a powerful mechanism. And in pharmaceutical, where they are, we have a problem there. We have a serious problem there because you have the first stage of the research that is done paid by the public, generally by the public. Then the promising molecules are given to big pharma that does the testing under condition of terrible conflict of interest, massaging the data. This is the word. Mm-hmm. There are companies that massage the data. Then at the end, they find few chemical entities that work. They make a markup on the entire sequence, including the part paid by the government, and they sell the drug to whom? In Europe, 95% to the government. Mm-hmm. And in this country, 50 or 60% to the government. So they make a markup on something that the government has spent, and then they ask the money again to the government.
We need to study political economy very closely now.
Very closely. And I mean, the proposal that people like Joe, I think also George Soros and others, including me, make is have the government go the other mile, all the way down to the testing. Mm-hmm. At that point, in any case, the testing is done in a public hospital entirely in Europe and half in the States. At that point, when you get the molecule, you give it to big pharma, but then at non-exclusion.
Hold an auction or something to sell the rights of a developed.
But at that point, they've got to produce at marginal cost, like if it were a brewery or gasoline.
Yeah, yeah. A friend of mine who studies pharmaceutical industry said they always talk about in that industry that they need to pay for R&D, but essentially it's the taxpayers that are paying for the R&D. They're paying for marketing.
Exactly.
And I don't know enough about the industry to have validated that, but that appears to be the kind of logic that we've seen in recent years. And then the generic alternatives are kept out, which is essentially creating monopoly rents.
Monopoly rents and pushing it over time, also after the 20 years after the expiration.
Well, myself as a macroeconomist, the only time I get really upset by this, other than when I have to pay for drugs, is when I look at the like Congressional Budget Office and other budget analysts who never consider public expenditure on science as having anything to do with society's productivity. And however messy it is that it transmits or becomes a monopoly, the biotechnology industry, pharmaceutical industry are more productive based on public expenditures that were made in an earlier chapter that, how we say, started these innovations.
And they are not so productive because at the end, the last mile, big pharma essentially looks for Me Too drugs, cosmetic change on existing drugs, don't take risk, especially on diseases.
At the margin, there's not a lot of new impact as a result.
And in fact, the number of new chemical entities approved each year by the FDA ranges between 20, 30, that's all.
That's interesting. Let's go back to the innovation, the Schumpeterian innovation, the endogenous innovation. If you were giving advice to the United States, what kind of public allocation should we make to return the United States to its historic role as a scientific and technical innovator?
Well, I would make a huge research programs of the size, on that Obama was right, I mean, of the size of the Apollo program, the space, for the environment, essentially for sustainability, environment-friendly technologies. Have the same effort that in the 60s went, 50s and 60s and 70s went in military space programs.
And I think the carbon emissions have been, even though it's very cold in New York as we talk today, the carbon emissions concerns are worldwide. And that science, you know, and many times when people are talking about science, they say, well, the American government will support it, but other countries will study it and adopt it. And so the commercial developments will be done in Korea or wherever. But in the case of science on climate change, wherever it occurs, if it's applied everywhere, we're all better off. This is a global public good.
And also, yes, scientific knowledge travels, but technological knowledge travels much less. Because there is a tacit component in technological knowledge that makes it relatively sticky to the place where it was generated.
Where the labs are, where people are learning and improvising in small. Last question for you. What would you recommend a young person do in terms of their education and their focus, given the world that you see today?
Within economics or in general?
Either one, but within economics, I suppose.
Well, within economics, if a young person has courage, guts, integrity, and curiosity about the world, I would push this person in the direction precisely of an alternative micro-founded macro. That also requires a lot of statistical work, because also the econometrics went astray in correspondence to the craziness of the macro modeling. The incumbent macro modeling, also the econometric, was basically built to support that monster. So I would urge this person to put an effort on reconstructing historical and formal accounts of macroeconomic dynamics, micro-founded in sound behavioral hypotheses on what a multitude of agents does. And in fact, I mean, this is another area we were talking before about that, where an institution like INET could help a lot. I mean, reconstruct the behavioral regularities. I mean, how do firms set prices? How do they invest? Why the R&D propensity is what it is? I mean, we had, especially on prices, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, quite a few efforts trying to analyze at micro level with interviews, following firms. When economists realized that the evidence was contrary to the theory, rather than abandoning the theory, they abandoned the evidence.
Yeah, and one of the themes that we've, at the level of the board of INET, have sought to emphasize is that in the balance between deductive mathematical inquiry and inductive inquiry and finding inspiration, that we've got to get back to responding to the data and explaining the world we see before us.
And as we were saying, really bottom up. I mean, going to the data and let them talk. With skillful statistics that let the data talk.
Yes. Good. Excellent. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.